Good afternoon. I hope you all are well, and welcome to the National Farmers Union Postal Service webinar discussion. My name is Leila Soberana, Senior Government Relations Representative for the National Farmers Union, and I will be your moderator for this session. Today we will be discussing some very important issues pertaining to the recent disruptions and changes to the U.S. Postal Service. Because so many rural Americans lack internet access, even before the pandemic, many rural folks have depended and continue to depend on the Postal Service more than Americans in rural areas, whether that is to receive prescription medicine in the mail, to cash checks, pay bills, purchase farm inputs, send live animals, or vote by mail. If you got a chance to participate in NFU's virtual fly-in this year, you will have noticed a few concerning data talking points provided, such as the fact that 630 rural communities don't have a pharmacy, and 1 in 4 non-metropolitan counties don't have a bank branch. Additionally, private services like UPS or FedEx many times don't deliver to rural areas, and when they do, they impose a steep surcharge. I would like to thank all of you who have raised your voices this week concerning the U.S. Postal Service, and if you strongly advocates for policies that will continue to ensure prompt mail delivery at an affordable rate in all parts of the country, and also the reversal of any changes that could cause delivery delays, while also making sure to restore overtime pay for the postal workers who have continued and continue to work and deliver mail throughout this pandemic. Today you will be hearing from 3 panelists: Jacob Gray of Gray Acres, who raises pastured poultry, grass-fed Highland cattle, and a raw goat milk dairy; Steve DiMatteo, Executive Assistant to the President, American Postal Workers Union; and Porter McConnell, Campaign Director for Take on Wall Street. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for talking to us today. Again, thank you for taking your time to join us. We want to start off with a few poll questions, and also want to thank both Emma Lindberg and Charlie Michael, who are technical support on NFU from our NFU staff. So thank you for your help. That being said, after these poll questions, we have also reserved time for after the panelists' presentations to answer your questions. So please include them in the chat below. We'll start off with the first poll question. Have you been experiencing Postal Service disruptions in your area? Great. And as you can see, 68% of you have. So thank you for answering that. We have a few more questions here for you. How close is your nearest post office? And if you can see the options here on your screen, please fill them out. And you can see the results here. 69% of you have one 0 to 5 miles. So that's great. Well, I do see some outlying here. So thank you for answering this question. Do you depend on the U.S. Postal Service for more than just regular mail? Please click all that apply. Wow, okay, 70% of you depend on the mail for checks. Thank you for sharing. Next question. Have you or someone you know had a local mailbox removed? Great. And then, have you noticed bank branches closing near you over the last decade or two? %59 of you have. Okay. Thank you for answering these questions. I would also like to, I will be providing my email in the chat. If you have questions that arise after this session, please feel free to email me, and I can also direct them to our panelists if they pertain to them. With that being said, I would like to introduce you all to Jacob Gray.
Thanks, Layla. Hey, I'm Jacob Gray. Thanks for having me here, National Farmers Union. I was asked to speak about kind of my relationship with the Postal Service and kind of how our operation has depended on it over the years. Started raising birds about 7 years ago. After exiting my internship program, I bought a little piece of land and started running birds on it, just about 100 to start off with. Since then, every year, I've doubled my operation, with the exception of this year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The only other processor in the Valley that was processing poultry retired about 3 years after I started raising birds, and so me and my business partner, we built the first mobile processing facility, I think in the state, at least the one that we knew of. And so we started processing ours along with some other small scale poultry producers around the Valley. We were doing anywhere between 2,000 and 4,000 birds a year. We'd roll up to people's farms or process them here. We do between 100 and 200 a day. We quickly outgrew that, again, with that doubling up. Once I raised over 1,500 birds, I thought, we really need something a little bit bigger. But our state didn't really have any regulations around regulating poultry processing. They left it all to the USDA. So we met with the state, the USDA, and some other stakeholders, and we started the long, arduous process of, getting laws passed and getting new things in the state, especially new regulations. So after about a 3-year, I won't call it a fight, but it was a process. We got some regulations in. We started construction on our new building, and we built. It was actually the second state licensed poultry facility in Colorado. And so we got up and operational this year. We got this is our first year licensed, and we kind of grew to reach more of a wholesale market. And so, this spring we had everything planned out. We were going to raise about 4,000 birds, hit our chick schedule and everything like that. And then COVID happened. And so we had to adjust. I was going to go to farmer's market with another pastured pork producer, but the market didn't even know if it was going to happen. So we dropped out of that. We had some concerns about restaurant sales when it looked like restaurants were going to close, and they in fact did. And so we got a little worried, but we kept all of our future deliveries intact because we wanted the hatchery to be able to rely on us. And we figured, maybe people need meat. And it turned out people did need meat. The direct meat sales, I feel like, at least in our area, because of COVID, really went up. We got a ton of pre-sales, and we've been doing really well with that. But with that being said, early spring, we planned everything out, and so we just kept it going. So the way we've run it traditionally is we depend on the Postal Service to get our chicks in within 2 days of hatching. When a chick is hatched from an egg, they have about 48 hours of embryo still inside them, and so they can survive pretty well up to that 48 hours. And so what we do is we pay premium to the hatchery based in California that we use. They expedite ship them. They jump on a plane over to Denver. They drive all the way to Junction, down to our local spot in Paonia, and then we go and pick them up. And so that all happens usually within 48 hours. This year was a little bit different, seeing as everything was delayed because of COVID and all this, the talks of the Postal Service getting shut down. We were seeing consistently 3 days, if not 4-day deliveries. And so at a 3-day delivery, we might see a 10 to 15% loss right at the start out of the gate, because, they come in and they're just stressed the heck out. They've sat in a box with their fellow other chicks for 72 hours at that point with no food or water, and they just come in looking a little rough. And so we see a lot of loss on the tail end of that. And as the season progressed, the shipping just started getting worse. We'd have to go all the way to Grand Junction, which is 75 miles away, to pick up, or they would come in to the Paonia post office after 4 days. And at that point, upwards of half the chicks in the box would be fully dead. And so it just started hitting our operation pretty hard. And what really happened was, on our 10th delivery this year, what we were doing was we were getting 400 birds each batch. And so this 10th batch came in on a 4th day, and there was maybe 30 or 40 dead, which wasn't terrible, but you could tell when we were dunking the chicks, giving them their first drink, that most of them were going to lose it. And so I came back the next morning after giving them food and drink, and putting them under heat lamps, that another like 250, 300 had died. So it was at that point that I kind of made the decision. I talked to my business partner. We called the hatchery and we said, look, we've got to cancel the next 2 orders. It was 800 birds. And we said, we're just going to have to cut the season short. So all said and done, we're going to lose probably around between 15 and 20,000 in potential gross sales, with somewhere around 7 or 8,000 in potential net income. We had to renegotiate our loan terms on the building we built last year. And then we're seriously considering looking to a more local route, which isn't the worst option, but for a hatchery at least. But the problem is the hatcheries around here don't hatch the breed that we've kind of built our business around. We're looking at those wholesale customers. They want a more traditional breast ear bird, so we use the Cornish cross, and we can't find it anywhere in the state. So it looks like we're still going to have to rely on the Postal Service, but I really don't know how we're going to do that with what's happened. So this could change our business plans pretty considerably. So with that, thanks for hearing my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Jacob. Up next, we have Steve.
Thanks, Layla, and thanks to all of you for having me on and for reaching out to us and asking us to tell you a little bit more about the state of play in the Postal Service. I just want to tell Jacob that I'm really heartbroken and saddened to hear your story, and appreciate you sharing it as well. I just want to start off by telling you a little bit about who we are and who I represent. Our union represents 200,000 postal workers in every city, town, and hamlet across the country. If you've got a post office, and I think most of you do, there's 32,000 of them across the country, and you know the friendly clerk there, then you probably know one of our members. We also represent the folks who sort the mail, program and repair the mail sortation machines, folks that drive the trucks, repair the trucks, vehicle and facility maintenance crews, janitors, customer service, sales staff. Basically all of the postal workers that you don't see, the sort of unseen magic behind the curtain that makes the Postal Service work, those are our members. I'm sure after hearing Jacob's story, many of you are probably thinking about the ways the changes in the mail in this last year have affected your lives. I want you to know that the postal workers that we represent, we see you, we hear you, and we've been some of the most vocal critics of what's happening at the Postal Service right now. And we're hoping to be able to work with you and the NFU and many others in this big coalition to save the Postal Service and get things back on the right track. Before I talk about how I think we can do that together, I just want to tell you a little bit more about how we see how we've gotten to this point that we're in right now. You probably know that the Postal Service, you may not know, but the Postal Service has been a trusted and reliable part of American society even before the country itself was born. Dating before 1776, started in 1775, the mail service has for generations fulfilled the mission that we have under the law to bind the nation together through the prompt, reliable, and efficient provision of postal services. So whether it's the Federalist Papers, which informed the founders' debates over the ratification of the Constitution, they were circulated by mail, or the Amazon package that arrives in 2 days along with your magazines and your pension checks, your Social Security checks, and the correspondence from family across the country. The Postal Service has always been there, and we hope will always be there to serve the American people. But that very notion of serving everyone every single day, or at least 6 days a week, we consider it a small d democratic right. We think it's under tremendous threat at this given moment. For decades, many in politics have put a target on the back of the Postal Service. Maybe it's because it brings in $70 billion with a B a year, $70 billion in revenue that could instead go to Wall Street. Maybe it's because it provides more than 600,000 family-sustaining union jobs, or maybe because it's just an example of government working. You know, the Postal Service has an unprecedented 91% approval rating across the political spectrum. Whatever their reasons, many for decades have advocated degrading and breaking up the Postal Service and selling it off to private interests. Now, normally those arguments haven't been very politically favorable and wouldn't see the light of day in Washington, but that's changed in the last few years, and certainly under this administration. In 2018, a White House Office of Management and Budget report openly proposed privatizing the Postal Service in a broader report about reforming the federal government. A few months later, the White House had stood up a task force to study the Postal Service specifically. That task force stopped short of proposing privatization outright, but called for many draconian changes that would ensure the Postal Service would be attractive to private investors. And those were things like cuts in delivery, getting rid of any of the union rights that our members enjoy, and massive increases in prices, particularly for parcel shippers, for those that are sending packages through the mail, but also introducing this notion that we might consider distance pricing as a new model rather than the uniform rates that we currently enjoy. And I know that would have real implications for growers across the country who often live farther afield from the main city centers. Now, coming into this year, we always thought that we'd have a fight on our hands to save the Postal Service from those who would like to break it up or slow it down, and certainly the Wall Street investors that would like to get a piece of the pie. And that's the context that we came into this year and really into the last 3 or 4 years facing. But then, of course, the pandemic hit. And it's been hard to overstate really the impact of the pandemic on the Postal Service. One thing you have to understand is that normally the Postal Service functions without any taxpayer funding. It's been able to fund itself entirely on the sale of postage and other postal services. But in this year, certain classes of mail, because of the pandemic and the economic contraction, are down as much as 40%, close to 50%. And the Postal Service is projecting that COVID-related losses can exceed $50 billion, again with a B, $50 billion in the next 10 years. And that's unrelated to some of the other debates that you may have heard about the Postal Service's ability to fund some retirement benefits. This is just COVID-related losses over the next 10-year window. So we've recognized this as a real crisis. We know that the Postal Service is projected that it could run out of operating cash sometime next year and would be forced to either close a great number of post offices or severely contract postal services or find some sort of emergency relief through Congress or other means next year. Early projections suggested that sort of moment of crisis could have come as early as this year. Thankfully, package volumes have been up more than expected over the last couple of months, and that's pushed the moment of real crisis out a few months. But we know that the situation is just as serious now as it was when the pandemic first hit, and it really calls for immediate reaction on the part of our lawmakers and our leaders in Washington. The situation is serious. It's real. We've seen Congress dole out $500 billion to private industry over the last several months in some of these pandemic response bills, but there's so far been nothing in store for the Postal Service, and we're convinced that we need to continue the push to receive that emergency financial relief that we've asked for. Up to now, we've been asking for $25 billion emergency relief. That was an ask that was come together with the postal workers unions and the Postal Service's bipartisan board of governors. $25 billion we think would be enough to keep the Postal Service above water this year and next, and give us some more time to look at some of the larger systemic changes that would need to be addressed to ensure the Postal Service is vibrant for many decades to come. The House of Representatives has passed this emergency relief twice, once in the HEROES Act in the spring, and again just a few weeks ago after the Speaker called the House back out of recess to address the postal crisis. So our union is continuing to ask the Senate to do the same, to pass this $25 billion emergency relief. We know that the Postal Service plays an incredibly important role in rural parts of the country, and we're hoping that the senators from those states can bend Mitch McConnell's ears and bend the ears of those in the administration that need to recognize that the need to save the Postal Service is not really a partisan issue, is one that affects everybody across the country. So the need for emergency relief, I have to say, predated some of the service changes that came in place with this new Postmaster General, and the need for that emergency relief will continue even after we've addressed some of these service changes. And I just want to underscore that, we're not just asking for money at this moment. We've been very active in the fight back against the changes that led to the situation like the one Jacob discussed. And I'm hopeful we can join with the NFU in continuing to put pressure on Congress and the Postal Service to address this in a real meaningful way and as quickly as possible. So we're hopeful that your activism this week, in conjunction with ours and this big broad coalition we're building to fight back to save the Postal Service, can do just that. We know it's not just vital for family farmers. It's the Postal Service is really a lifeline for so many Americans who depend on it to deliver prescription drugs, benefit checks, and just the regular correspondence and mail that every single family across the country relies on. One final thing I want to leave you with, and it was mentioned in the poll question. You are all undoubtedly aware that the election is coming up. You may have heard quite a bit of discussion about whether or not the Postal Service is able to provide the services needed to safely and securely deliver mail ballots in this election. I want to tell you that we can, and that we are ready to do so. We've been discouraged by these delays and these slowdowns, and by the many reports of the machines coming offline or the blue boxes being removed from communities. And we're working feverishly to roll back all of those service cuts. But I want to tell you that the Postal Service still has the capacity to accept, sort, and deliver your ballots this November. So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I am going to tell you one way that you might consider voting, and that's still voting by mail. We need to keep the pressure up on this Postmaster General, on the Postal Service, and on Congress to roll back these service cuts, to make sure that Congress provides the money the Postal Service needs to survive through the pandemic, through the economic crisis, and for many decades to come. But when it comes to the election this year, I want you to rest assured that we can do this. The Postal Service regularly handles 500 million pieces of mail every single week. We know there's about 180 million registered voters in the country. If every single voter in the country voted by mail, we still know that it would be just another busy week for the Postal Service. And of course, this will be spread out over many number of weeks. So I want you to know that you can trust us. You can rely on postal workers. We take our responsibility and our civic duty in that respect very seriously. And we're hopeful that you consider the Postal Service a reliable partner as you go to cast your ballot this coming fall. So we want to thank you again for joining us. I think Layla, you've already offered this at the top, but she's got my email. If anybody has any additional questions that we're not able to address today, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will say that our campaign to secure this funding and to roll back these service cuts is going to continue. We're not going to fight. We're not going to stop fighting until we've won. I want to invite all of you to join us. If you want to share your story, a story like Jacob's or something else, you can go to usmailnotforsale.org. Spell it all out, usmailnotforsale.org. If you click the button at the top that says Save the Post Office, there's a nice little tool there that will let you get in touch with us or record a video. It's very easy to do. Record a video testimonial about how the changes to the Postal Service have been affecting you. Those are really powerful, and I want to encourage everyone to do that and to reach out to me if you've got any additional questions after this. So thanks so much for the time, and happy to be with you.
Thank you, Steve. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to our next panelist, Porter McConnell, Campaign Director for Take on Wall Street.
Thanks, Layla, and thanks, Steve, and thanks, Jacob. I'm glad to be with you guys today. I just wanted to, well, first introduce myself. As Layla said, I am Porter McConnell, and I run something called Take on Wall Street. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the power that Wall Street has over our lives, and also how that relates to the post office and how we don't have to just take that. There are some alternatives to the current system that Steve and Jacob have outlined. So next slide, please. So I want you all to know that there's this thing going on in the background to coronavirus, to all of the other political developments of the last few years. That is Wall Street sort of slowly taken over the economy. So if you can see, and not everybody thinks and reads through tables, but the thing to note about that finance and its share of GDP chart is that since World War II, finance, so think of it as like finance is debt. There is no financial industry if not for debt. So making money from money or holding debt as a share of the overall economy of the things we make and the things we do has more than tripled since World War II. It's really taken over all of the parts of our lives. You can see that when there were layoffs and hunger and people suffering all around the country from the coronavirus pandemic, the stock market, especially in the early days, was hitting all-time new highs. And that's often because finance executives take a short-term approach, sort of a take the money and run approach, which leads to booms and busts and makes our whole economy more unstable. So for example, private equity firms chop up perfectly good companies for parts, and they lay off workers by the thousands. And because they wrote the laws, they make money even if the company goes bankrupt. So across the country, hundreds of thousands of workers have lost their jobs and their pensions and their benefits because of these private equity-owned bankruptcies. And so you see that with A&P, Payless, Joann Fabric and Michaels, Shopko, Cabela's, two big high-profile ones recently, Sears and Toys R Us. In Iowa, just two, let's see here, in Iowa, 1,800 jobs at Sears were lost, and 330 at Toys R Us. And in Wisconsin, it was 2,500 jobs from Sears and 660 at Toys R Us. One thing that we'll hear, when people are asking, how's the economy doing? We'll look at the stock market. I think it's important to note that the stock market is not the economy. The economy we have should be measured by things like, do people have enough to eat without working 2 and 3 jobs? Are Black and brown families doing as well as white ones? Do all the jobs in a town not dry up overnight on the whim of somebody thousands of miles away? That seems like a better measure of the US economy. We just don't think Wall Street is doing a very good job. And frankly, we want it back. Next slide, please. So what's that got to do with the post office, you say? Steve sort of mentioned some of those sort of Wall Street things going on in the background, and that's certainly all very true. There's in some ways there's no better example of Wall Street's power over the economy, but we think that not everything is a business. Some things are sacred and they don't need to make a profit to be worth something to people. And so, instead of trying to privatize a national treasure like the post office, we should be expanding it into a community hub for services. So the things that we're asking for right now are to stop the service cuts that Steve mentioned. There should not be baby chicks arriving dead. That is a travesty. We need to pass emergency relief for the post office, $25 billion. And also, while we're at it, make sure that states have enough money to run safe elections that protect our vote this fall. And then we need to just stop in its tracks this USPS privatization. There's no reason why we need to do that. And instead, we can think of a different version of the post office, a version that I think is true in a lot of countries and also is true of a lot of communities and has been especially true in the past. that the post office is where you go to chat with folks and to do a number of things. You know, to get access to government services, to you know, buy office supplies, maybe to use the internet, maybe to get a notary public, any number of things. That there's no reason why we shouldn't be using that incredible, you know, from the poll, that incredible presence that post office branches have in our communities for good. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest ways to do that, and one of the biggest needs that you guys are, you know, way ahead of everybody in identifying, is bringing back postal banking. You know, we had postal banking in, you know, in a good chunk of the previous century, and it's a good moment to bring it back. And it's not, you know, you could say, oh, well, maybe the private sector now plays that role and we don't need it anymore. But actually, it's true that, you know, even in spite of the proliferation of all these big Wall Street banks, 1 in 4 American households are still unbanked or underbanked. And, you know, if you think about that, it's really expensive to be unbanked and underbanked. You know, Americans who are underserved, they're now spending twice the budget for the federal food stamps program on fees and interest each year, on things like payday lenders, title lenders, check cashers. And, you know, part of that is because those big Wall Street banks, you know, when they serve low-income households, they only do so when they can charge them $35 for an overdraft over and over and over again. What if regular people could have access to a basic bank account at the post office? What if you didn't have to pay $7.50 for an ATM at a gas station? What if you could use a low-fee ATM at the post office instead? What if you could send remittances back to family members in other countries? What if you could just cash your paycheck at the post office? There is a version of postal banking that's gaining traction right now that would have the Federal Reserve providing those bank accounts. Just to say real quick, there's a bunch of sort of technical stuff, but the key thing is they're already doing this for the big banks. The big commercial banks, they give these great terms to. No fee, high interest. It's really excellent accounts. They only do them for the commercial banks. And why is that? Doesn't make any sense. They could do this for us. And the post office is ideally positioned to be the place where you have your branches, your brick and mortar, you know, places to go. This plan has won support from Democratic presidential hopefuls, many of them, and also made it into the platform this year. You know, and I will say that is a result of advocacy, and nobody's going to give you something that you don't fight for. So I wouldn't say that there's nothing magic about any of the parties in this situation. It is all about what we are willing to fight for. And I will say that actually another proposal is coming out today from Senator Gillibrand and Senator Sanders. That is a postal banking bill. It works a little differently, but is also a great proposal. And if you're interested in that, there'll be some news coverage later today for sure. And there will be a Facebook live stream on, I think, both of their pages at 2:30 Eastern. Anyway, so there's a lot of interest and a lot of love for the idea. I think, you know, that would not extend to the big banks. They're not super excited about this idea, but you got to think about why. Next slide, please. I think one thing I want to leave you with is, as tough as this situation is, and I can't imagine what it's like to be a grower right now or to be a postal worker right now, and my gratitude extends to everybody for help keeping this country run. But we are not powerless as a group. You know, as Steve said, recording those videos is tremendously helpful. And, you know, you may think, oh, well, my story is not the most compelling story, but I promise you that it is. And the more those stories get out there in the news, the more it's harder to look the other way. So there's a lot we can do to save the post office. There's a lot we can do to turn it into something that we really want in the future and make it into, you know, a hub for our communities. And so I just wanted to highlight, definitely echoing what Steve said about going to US Mail is Not for Sale and recording a video or seeing other ways you can help. There's some other quick things you can do. So I'll just take a moment to highlight those. Next slide, please. This is a visibility push called Postmark My Profile. I don't know about y'all, but I don't look that way on social media. That's fine. The idea is to sort of, make sure that people know that you support the post office, and that if that is, if that stamp gets seen on a whole bunch of profiles, it starts to raise the visibility of the issue. And so it's just a way of letting folks know where you stand on the issue. So I will stick in the chat window, and maybe Layla can send around later too, the instructions for how to do that. It's real simple. You just click on a link on Twitter or on Facebook, and it'll just put, a little postmark in front of your profile picture. So that's something you can do to show your support. That's a real quick thing, and something that we're looking for everybody in every state to do. And we'll do that through the month of September. Next slide, please. Another thing you can do is, and I know several of you are, you can get active in our target states. As Steve mentioned, there's, it's up to the Senate right now to make this change, to provide the emergency relief, to mandate that the service cuts stop. It really does rest with the Senate. And one of the things going on in an election season is that the senators that are, what they call the frontline senators, the ones who are maybe the most vulnerable or who are up for re-election, are paying maybe just a little bit more attention to their constituents right now. So we identified with the coalition working on this some top targets in Iowa and Colorado, and North Carolina and Maine and Georgia and Arizona. And then, there's some folks who, are pretty important to this fight in some other places that I know you guys have some presence. So I want to flag Wisconsin and Oklahoma and South Dakota. Anything that you can do in any of these states is really useful. I will put in the chat after I'm done, when we do questions, what you can do. But basically, anything that you think that you can, like, we can help you place a letter to the editor. We have some sample language that you could adapt to say what you want in your voice. You can write an op-ed even if you'd like to. You can make a call to your senator's office. That's quicker. There's just a number of things you can do, and they're especially well taken in these states. We've heard in the hearings with the Postmaster General a few weeks back, the senators were telling folks just how many people they heard from, and it would be 18,000 of my constituents called me, or 40,000 of my constituents called me, and that is the reason, as Steve said, that they, that the House reconvened. That is the reason that they're paying attention to those calls. It's really true. So that would be a really, really helpful thing to do. Next slide, please. And then, if you want to join an email list because you want to be a little more involved, you want to get the updates. It's not especially high volume, but if you'd like, I can add you to the email list that lets you know, like, what's the latest going on and how can we help, how can we plug in, basically the next month or two, there's going to be a fair amount of action. And so if you'd like, just drop me an email and you can join that list, and we'll keep you posted on the day's events, because right now it's real hard to keep track of all of the things going on. All of the challenges to our ability to vote by mail, all of the House hearings, and all of those things happening. It's hard to keep track of who's suing whom. I know those of you from Colorado might have seen that your Secretary of State was suing the Postmaster General because he was sending out messages saying you had to request a ballot, but actually the ballot's just going to get mailed to you. And so there are all these things going on, and Steve and I joke that, like, who knows what 48 hours from now is going to look like. But we have every reason to be optimistic, and there's a lot we can do together. So I'll put a couple of resources in the chat, and I'm very anxious to hear from you guys about whether this tracks with your experience, and what you'd like us to know and how we can be of help to you right now. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Now we will move to our Q&A. So if you have a question, please drop it in the chat box, or the Q&A, pardon me. We'll start off with the first question. This one's for you, Porter. What is a target state for this campaign as you were presenting? I believe that was in response to one of your slides.
Yeah, I don't know if we can call that slide back up. I can also, there are a couple of states that we thought about that might be places where you live that I can add to that slide, but that's a good place to start. So basically, we're real interested in folks reaching out to their senators in Iowa and in Colorado, in North Carolina and Maine and Georgia and Arizona. But I know you guys have a presence in Wisconsin. I know that is also very useful, and Oklahoma and South Dakota. I don't think that any members of the Senate are a waste to contact right now. I actually think, you know, no matter where you're from, making that call is a good idea. But there are some states where it's, you know, maybe more likely to lead to that sort of, you know, that call, as Steve said, to Mitch McConnell saying, you got to do something about this, you know, I'm feeling it. We know, for instance, that some of our work, we suspect that some of the pressure in North Carolina is getting to Tom Tillis, and so we want to keep that up. Yeah, those are the main ones, but you know, I would say it's worthwhile, and there's a link in the chat about how to contact your senator, but I think it's worthwhile in all states. I don't know, Steve, if you've had anything.
Great.
No, the only thing I would say is to underscore Porter's one point. There's no wasted phone call on this. You know, we've heard from just about every Senate office that the volume of calls they've gotten about the Postal Service over the last 6 to 8 weeks has outstripped anything they've ever seen before, and that is all to the better. I mentioned in my presentation that there are some real strong opponents of the Postal Service in Washington right now. I don't think anybody currently in government, well, certainly anybody in this current administration really wants to be having a fight about how much we're going to fund the Postal Service. I think they'd rather be continuing to pursue their agenda of slowing down the mail and increasing prices and preparing it for privatization. But the very fact that we've gotten tens of thousands of phone calls into Senate offices across the country is having an impact. So I just want to encourage everybody to keep that up, and really, if you haven't done so already, contact your lawmakers and let them know that we need to save the Postal Service.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. Next question we have here is, has there been any analysis conducted on what could happen to mailing and shipping functions, including costs, if the U.S. Postal Service were to be significantly downsized?
That's probably one for me. There have been I really want to resist the urge to get too technical or wonky here, but really the Postal Service works well because there has traditionally been a lot of volume in the system. The USPS, right? The United States is one of the biggest countries in the world. We've got 160 million addresses that we deliver to every day. And of rich economies, the Postal Service postage at the USPS is about half of what it costs in other countries that are much smaller with much greater population density. And we've been able to do that because there's traditionally been a lot more mail in the USPS. So, you know, anything that would either raise prices or drive away business or leave people like Jacob with really bad experiences that drive them out of the mail is a problem, because it's this network industry where every single piece of mail helps support the rest of the network. Every single post office helps support the rest of the network, which is why we've been so reluctant to let them start cranking down that ratchet to service cuts. We really think that the Postal Service functions best when it's a big, robust network. I could find you some resources and funnel them through to Layla if you're interested in getting more into the weeds about it. But we're very much committed to at least 6 days of delivery every single week. We need to make sure that the processing facilities that exist today aren't closed. We've been very reluctant and have fought back in some very serious campaigns over the last number of years about closing of post offices. We think every single post office that's in the country needs to be there. It's serving a community, it's there for a purpose, and we're not going to let them start closing them down, because really that just leaves us with a jankier and more expensive system for everybody else going forward.
Great. Actually, another question for you, Steve. Here we have, from the union's perspective, how has the Amazon contract or other similar contracts impacted the U.S. Postal Service?
Folks know about this one because President Trump has a bee in his bonnet about it. He's said a number of times that the post office has given Amazon preferential rates and that they're losing money on every single Amazon package that they deliver. It's just not true, unfortunately. I don't want to psychoanalyze the guy. Some folks think he's got it out for Jeff Bezos because of his connection to the Washington Post and the Post coverage of Trump. I don't want to get into all that. All I know is that the Postal Regulatory Commission has looked into it. The Postal Service itself has looked into it. The Postal Service's independent inspector general has looked into it. Academics have looked into it. The post office is required by law to cover their costs on every single class of mail, and each of their contracts with private companies where they're a high volume shipping partner have to be at least cover their costs, if not be profitable. And we know for a fact that the Amazon contract does that as well. So I think it's a bit of a red herring. And I don't think there's a whole lot there.
Thank you, Steve. Question for Porter. You mentioned some of this in your presentation. Has anyone in Congress drafted bills to support postal banking?
Yeah, there have been, at this point, I would say 3 bills that we are watching and excited about. There was a bill that Kirsten Gillibrand from New York introduced. She's introduced it a couple times now. That is a very bold version of postal banking that includes small dollar lending, so you could get a loan from the postal bank. There was a proposal to do this. I think I mentioned briefly the Fed accounts proposal, which is that the Federal Reserve System backs these bank accounts that they give to commercial banks, but they could give to regular people too, and that the post office would serve as the branch system for that. That got a lot of excitement. It actually made it into a House version of a draft House version of one of the stimulus bills. And so that is an idea to watch. It made it into the Democratic platform as well. So that's called Fed accounts. And then, today, actually, in about 45 minutes, there will be a bill introduced by Senator Gillibrand and Senator Sanders. That is that previous proposal about the full range of postal banking, including small dollar loans, with the addition that JP Morgan Chase, I don't know if you guys heard, I didn't mention it, but there was a leak that JP Morgan Chase was in talks with the post office to deliver an exclusive contract for something they were calling postal banking, but which basically was, Chase branches inside post offices and with their own ATMs and that sort of thing. And I think that was a response, to be honest, to growing interest in the good version of postal banking. So anyway, that was in the news, and Senators Gillibrand and Sanders decided what they wanted to do was take that Gillibrand bill and add something to it, which said, and JP Morgan Chase need not apply. So this is a public service. This is not going to be privatized. This is not part of some sort of privatization plot. Postal banking should be a public service, should reach the 1 in 4 households who are unbanked or underbanked. And so it's that bill plus the tweak that, JP Morgan Chase and the big commercial banks should not be part of that equation because they won't handle it responsibly. So 3 bills, we're excited about all of them. We are hopeful that we'll build enough political will to really sort of go all in on one of them in the new Congress and fight to get it to become law.
Great. Really appreciate all of your questions here. We're getting some very good questions. Next question here. What is the Postal Service doing to ensure timely return of mail-in ballots, especially when distribution centers are often not located in rural areas?
So the Postal Service has traditionally, and they're doing it again this year, traditionally worked very closely with state and local election authorities to ensure that the processes are in place to make sure the ballots are accepted in time and move through the process in the Postal Service in a timely manner. You're right that not every community has a sorting facility, but the way the mail works is we accept it at a post office or in a blue box or whatever, and then it enters the system and goes to a central hub and then is spat back out to make it on its way back to delivery to the address to which it's meant to be delivered. Election mail gets treated differently during election season. We've just put out a notice to our members, and the Postal Service has done it to them as well, basically saying be on the lookout for these ballots. You got to move them expeditiously, give them priority treatment. You've got to do a sweep of the plant every single night to make sure that there's no election mail that's been left behind and not been treated. And also, I want to say as well, in light of a lot of the delays that we've seen, we've pushed really hard on management to sit down at the table with us and make sure that those processes are in place, that folks are getting the training necessary to be able to identify, to postmark things properly, identify those ballots and move them swiftly. And we're also looking at other things we might do that we may not have thought of in the past to ensure that election mail gets accepted, transported, and delivered in a timely manner. Postal workers will move heaven and earth. You know, we've got all sorts of anecdotal stories of our members going out at 11 o'clock at night on election night, making sure they are driving bags full of mail to the county election board to make sure they get there in time. We're very much committed to this, and we're going to work. The workers are certainly committed to it. We're going to work with management to make sure we get the job done. But we also need, voters to take the situation seriously, to recognize that there have been some changes, and to, if you're planning on voting by mail, request your ballot early. If you're in a state that's not going to send you a ballot automatically, request your ballot early, fill it out, and get it back in the mail as early as you can. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure it moves quickly and gets to where it needs to go.
Thank you. We have time for one more question here, and I think this one will be directed to Jacob. Why have delivery times for mail grown so drastically in recent years? We did mention that. I'm comment from somebody here. I no longer feel I can trust the Postal Service to deliver in a timely, reliable manner. What are some reasons the Postal Service is particularly important for rural communities?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but it's like, as the world keeps getting more densely populated in these urban areas, and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, so I understand where the populations are. I think rural America we tend to get forgotten about, especially seeing it in agriculture and, with the food system. We're relying less and less on farms, and I feel like we're just relying more on the cities to provide everything for us while kind of forgetting about our rural industries. But we rely on it. I mean, it's the only way we can stay connected. I mean, the internet has helped a little bit, but as far as anything tangible or physical, it's how we get everything. Without the Postal Service, I don't think we'd be able to survive out here.
Great, thank you. And then one last general question for all of you as we close this session. Can you please direct our viewers to any statistics, data sources that you've all been discussing, and then any last minute remarks?
So I'm moving frantically to get to that website, U.S. Mail Not for Sale, that I mentioned before. But if you go to that website and click resources at the top, there's a number of reports there that have statistics. I can also, Layla, maybe if you can circulate it afterwards to participants. We've worked very closely with a great group of researchers called the Institute for Policy Studies that have done a number of analyses on what's facing the Postal Service right now, including an analysis of what folks in rural parts of the country would face if the Postal Service were to be privatized. They looked at the surcharges that the private companies apply to their shipments to rural areas that Layla mentioned out at the top, and other ways that the prices might increase for folks in rural parts of the country. There's probably a dozen or so studies that would be really great if folks are interested in getting their hands on those, and I can send Layla the link just as soon as we're done.
Great.
I also want to give a shout out to the Campaign for Postal Banking site, which I, full disclosure, as a campaigner, not not a researcher. I use the know the facts section of that a lot, and it's useful because it's the questions you might have, and it's organized that way. So it's just campaignforpostalbanking.org.
Great.
Yeah, and I don't have any stats. I just want to, again, thanks everybody for listening to my story. I know it's just one small anecdote, but every story helps. So thanks for listening.
Great. And stories like you, Jacob, you are really, you're on the ground. So, you know, we really appreciate hearing from all of you, how this is impacting you. And we're doing our best to make sure that this message is being carried out during our virtual fly-in. If you all still have many meetings left, we want to wish you good luck, and, you know, please use me as a resource. My email's in the chat there, and I will make sure to also follow up with the data and statistics and all that after this session. I want to thank Emma and Charlie for the wonderful technical support that they provided, and also want to thank the all panelists today for taking the time and answering all the questions and providing their perspective. So with that being said, this concludes our session. Thank you so much.
And thanks to Layla.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Layla.
Thank you.
Nice chatting with everybody. Take care.